Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, we hear from the head coach as to what is ailing the Red Raiders, and he tells us something that we don't want to hear, or do we?
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Fixes tired fast with zero sugar and a convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. So go to 5hourenergy.com and use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That's Locked On CFB, Charlie Foxtrot Bravo, to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. So go to 5hourenergy.com today with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you today and still digesting what we saw not only over the weekend, but through the first 2 weeks of this 2024 season, and got to hear yesterday from Red Raider head coach Joey McGuire, and want to get into a couple of things that he was touching on today's program. We will get to the penalty issue, what Texas Tech is doing to attempt to address that moving forward. We'll also get to some of the questions Coach McGuire is asking between the years as far as rethinking some levels of aggression, or maybe when that aggression best serves his team. And I also want to get to here in just a moment some of what we know already it will look like, or what they will attempt out of the gates now up front along the offensive line, with Vinny Scurry out for the season and big question marks elsewhere surrounding a guy like Sterling Porsche and maybe some others. But first, wanted to kick off our conversation with Coach McGuire talking about what has to be done to be a better football team. And he starts this conversation and bases it largely on maybe a side of the football that fans have not been basing it, at least this most recent week. Coach McGuire talking about better defense must be played.
One of the biggest things we have to do is play better defense. We've got to set edges. We've got to get off the field. The first week we let a guy throw for 600 yards, and then this last week we let a guy rush for 300 yards, 197 by the quarterback. We're 128th right now in the country in total defense. I think we're 120th something in third down defense. We're allowing 7 of 10 touchdowns in the red zone. I think it has to start with that side of the ball. I know nobody believes that that wears red and black and the double T, but it has to start with us getting better on defense. And then we've got to take care of the football. The first game, I thought we did a really good job of taking care of the football. I think this game it was terrible as far as the turnovers, the missed conversions. And then we've got to, whenever you're talking about complementary football, we've got to really look at, are we running in the box that we need to run in, meaning if it's a 5-man box, are we still throwing the ball out there, or are we handing the ball off? I thought those guys will tell you, Cam will tell you, they're not Taj, and they understand that, but I didn't think they played a bad game rushing the football. I thought there was a couple of runs that you just got to get tough yardage, and you don't need to bounce it because, it's not going to be as big a play as what you think. But I thought those two guys did a good job, and I think we've got to definitely come out and establish a run this week, get the quarterback to settle down. But guys, you're not going to win games being 129th in the country on defense, and that's me. I'm a defensive coach. I'm embarrassed the way we're playing defense. I'm sure that Tim DeRuyter is going to come in here and tell you the same thing. And I know this, I know people don't want to hear it about winning the Big 12 right now because we just got beat the way we did, but you're not going to win the Big 12 scoring 60 points and giving up 59 points. It doesn't happen. It hasn't happened. So the thing that has to get fixed, and it starts with me and being a defensive coach, it's killing me, that we got to get better on defense.
I would like to say, Coach, there were plenty of us who were watching the Red Raiders prior to the year 2000, so we do believe that winning football starts with defense, and we are glad to hear conversation rooted in defense as far as getting wins. But Chris, I know the offensive side is always kind of low-hanging fruit for a fan to pick on because you see, well, that's not the touchdown play, so why'd you call that? Maybe a little easier to pick apart than the defense. But I got to tell you, I was a little surprised that he came in so defensively heavy as far as the message. He mentioned some offensive issues, obviously, that I think are worth noting, and we'll circle back. But, man, he was really rooting his grievance, it seemed like, with what has happened on the defensive side of the football through 2 weeks.
You go to your when adversity hits, you go to your roots, and that's what he is. It's what he's always been. After he kind of looked at or mentioned some of those where you rank, I kind of went further and looked at every basically team defensive rank. It's very sobering. So here you go. Total defense, it's 128th in the country. You're giving up 515 yards a game. Third down conversion defense, you're giving up those 48% of the time. That's 121st in the country. Fourth down conversion rate, it's 95th in the country. Red zone defense, it's 83rd in the country. Rushing defense, it's 116th in the country. Passing defense, it's 128th in the country. There are 7 clubs or programs that have given up 1,000 total yards plus through 2 games. You are one of those. And I think his point is we can talk about all kinds of stuff. And, yeah, you turning it over, the penalties and all that. But, boy, if you're really good on defense, it fixed a lot of what ailed you. And I think that's his roots. That's who he is. And that's what ultimately, what does he want this program to be? He wants to be really good on defense. And he wants to be able to – that's how when he was part of the Baylor staff, whenever they won the Big 12, ultimately that's how they did it. They've got all of Jalen Petrie and all those guys that went to the NFL. And so, you're a bit banged up with your team, and some of that is on defense. You're young on defense, but that's, whether it's scheme or effort or execution or whatever it might be, we're sitting here talking about how, I think his point was, we did good in coverage this one, but then it's like the dam broke with, how many games are you going to win when you give up 300 yards rushing? Let's be honest with each other.
Very few.
Yeah, zero. And I think that it was the explosive ones. It was you turn it over on downs, they hand it off 50 or 48 yards, touchdown. And a couple of those QB runs, there's some chunk plays there. And so if you can eliminate some of that, it cleans up a lot of these numbers and some of these rankings, and you feel better about life. But until you do, that's kind of, but I think he's going back to his roots there. And, people can say whatever they want about where to point the finger and blame and all that. But Joey is somebody that, because if he's going to ride this thing and either take it where he wants it to, or ultimately it's not good enough and, whatever, you've got to do it on your terms. You've got to do it the way you want to do it, not what you think people want or what they feel like it needs to look like. Because he said that before the season started. Yeah. We got too worried about what things are supposed to look like around here. We should have worried about the result. And I think that this is more him kind of, really pointing to himself in the mirror. Does this mean he gets more involved defensively? Does this mean, that I really don't know. I don't know what changes you'll get, but I find it interesting. But when you look at some of these numbers, there was some times around here where you were 80th in the country in defense and you felt like you couldn't stop anybody. What's a 128th do for you?
It takes me back to 2002, 2003, the sentence zone.
So anyway, and you can fiddle with the numbers however you want, and ultimately you just want to win. They don't care how, but I think this is just going back to your roots, man. That's typically when adversity hits, that's what you rely on, is what got me to this point. And why did I get this job? Why do I love football? What have I coached well all these years? Well, it's defense. He was a linebackers coach, and he's always been a defensive coach, and he recruits defensive players. He puts NFL people puts folks in the NFL on that side of the ball. So anyway, pretty sobering looking at some of the stats.
Obviously, whenever you have the start to the year that you've had, you beat an FCS team by 1 in overtime, and then you get whooped on the road by Washington State. You can pluck anything from any phase of the game just about and probably point to it and be like, okay, well, this is a reason, maybe not the or the biggest, but a reason why we haven't had the start that we wanted to. So defense, offense, whatever it might be, like you said, I think yesterday, just spin the wheel of pain, and pick one out. But I thought it was interesting to really hear him also mention. First, today's episode brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Locked On Texas Tech fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love. It's Ultimate College Football Head Coach. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of the Red Raiders? From recruiting players, hiring coaching staff, to overseeing training camp and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Think you can handle the pressure? Find out today. And even better, Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want and when you want. And of course, we've got a special offer for Locked On Texas Tech fans. Use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That's LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost for your program. Make sure you take advantage of this perk, as it's going to help your team get off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com, or find it in the app stores, and kick off the ultimate football experience with Ultimate College Football Head Coach now, and begin your coaching legacy today. I thought it was interesting to really hear him also mention what he did offensively when he talks about establishing the run, because, Chris, I know defensive coaches can go out there and coach the guys up and say, hey, just be better, play better defense, tackle better, align better, fit better, all these things. But how about also turning the attention to other phases of the game and saying, hey, could we possibly help a defense that's reeling? Could we possibly be a little more methodical offensively? Could we establish a ground game that maybe helps in that? Could we limit defensive exposure? And I believe in this so much, I think due in large part because I've seen it weaponized against us so often during the Mike Leach era. I've mentioned it already on a recent show. One of the kryptonites to a Coach Leach offense was to keep him on the sideline. Now, obviously, you got to be out there doing things otherwise. To do that, you've got to have some success in establishing the ground game. You got to pick up first downs. You got to convert third downs, etc. Much easier said than done, but it wasn't lost on me that he really brought up, like, hey, are we running the football when we need to be running the football, given what the box looks like across the line of scrimmage? And then he mentions we've got to establish the ground game. And I wonder if maybe a little bit of that is also rooted in some of what he is not seeing from his defense so far this season, because that sounds like, I don't know, a little bit of a change just in a small sample size of what he's had to say so far this year.
Well, and we will never know, but you replay that game Saturday with Taj Brooks. I mean, does Barron check to run more, knowing he's got Taj back there? I don't know that game, or what went on, but it does make, because every time Joey has talked about Taj Brooks, and they said it repeatedly on the coach's show last week, because I had Zach Kitley, I had Baron Morton, and I had Joey McGuire. And I think two of the three of them mentioned, they use the term security blanket. Like, he's our security blanket. He makes everything, he's the best at pass protection. And then, you're going to get the tough yards and all that. Well, what was the Charlie Brown character? Was it Linus that had the blanket walking around, and it was a security blanket, right? And I don't, it's not really fair to put it all on Taj not playing it. That's not, but you get what I'm saying. I just wonder how the game would have been operated differently from either play calling or with Zach or with Barron checking in and out of stuff if he's back there. I don't know.
Well, you mentioned the pass protection component as well, which is probably not getting enough run this week as far as conversation or things you missed without 28 being out there on Saturday.
For sure. And maybe that's part of why, because Barron did get hit hard several times. I mean, he got popped. And he starts talking to himself, and you can just tell, and you just, when a quarterback starts getting hit, it changes things a little bit, and you start feeling something when it's not even there. And, you've heard the whole offseason for the last 9 months, get rid of the ball. Don't take a hit. We need you. Live to fight another down. I mean, on and on and on. I've seen him hit the deep ball way too much to think that that's got to be an anomaly where you're just missing it that much. Or, so we'll if we look up in a couple of games and it's still the same thing, I mean, you may have a have to have a hard conversation, with things, but maybe Taj is playing this Saturday or next, and we can go back to like, okay, now you can remove that from the. I don't know. And your offensive line obviously took a major hit. You've got a reworked situation there that we'll get into. But
what did you make of the O-line shuffle? Because it seemed like he confirmed, at least to start the game, God only knows how they'll finish or what it'll look like as the game goes on, but that we'd be seeing Caleb Rogers at a left guard spot, Davion Carter at a right guard spot, Vinny Scurry's done for the year, and we don't know if Sterling Porsche will be available Saturday either. But what do you think about the move there for Rogers?
Yeah, odds are you're going to start this game this weekend the same way you finished the last one, and that would include Dalton Merriman at left tackle. We'll see. I just know if it was a head issue with Sterling Porsche, that the way the protocol works, I mean, it would be very difficult for him to get through the entire protocol and be ready for Saturday with no practice and all that stuff. That's just that's the medical rules there in play to protect kids and student athletes, which they should be in place. So we've already established too that Caleb Rogers much more comfortable on the right side, right?
Oh yeah, I remember that. Good.
Yeah. So yeah, this is the bad part about that left guard is the one position that you felt probably the strongest about most of the offseason and in fall camp. And he's taken the bulk of the reps. It's like you were moving a lot of other folks around or kind of cross-training this and that. But, I mean, Vinny Scurry was – now the positive news is, like we discussed on yesterday's show, Joey actually added this in today and said, hey, we've already started the paperwork process on Vinny coming back next year. It was his idea. So that's a positive if there's a positive to be found, but you got a ways to go before you can kind of figure out the offensive line concerns me more now than it has maybe even at any time last year, if I'm being honest with you. Yes.
I think I've just been at DEFCON level,
maybe.
Threat level, midnight all along. I don't know. I've embraced the horror so much. I just feel like, oh, another week where you've got some wild things happening with the offensive line, but a big challenge, obviously, for those guys as North Texas comes to town. Of course, Coach McGuire was asked about some of the aggression on fourth down and the analytics or whatever you want to tie it into and when it's used, when it's not used. And here's what Coach McGuire had to say about how that impacted the game on Saturday and the way they view it moving forward. First, today's episode brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Fixes tired fast. Whether you've got a long list of tasks at work or a bundle of DIY projects to tackle at home, take a 5 Hour Energy shot so you can cover everything with energy to spare. If you're like me, you've always got a lengthy list of things to get done around the house. So when you get your supplies for any project, don't forget the most essential one, a 5 Hour Energy shot. 5 Hour Energy shots give you the feeling of alertness and energy you need to get in the zone. And that's why 5 Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy and hectic day. And you always know where to find 5 Hour Energy shots, right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, and grocery store nationwide. Even better, stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. And right now, if you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy today, you can use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That's LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions and does not apply to subscription orders. Boost your day, boost your life, and get in the get it done zone by going to 5hourenergy.com today. Some of the aggression on fourth down and the analytics or whatever you want to tie it into and when it's used, when it's not used. And here's what Coach McGuire had to say about how that impacted the game on Saturday and the way they view it moving forward.
That's something that we will spend all week long. If we're going to change our aggression, do we change our aggression on our side of the ball? Do we get to a point When the analytics really got started, if you go back, even if you look at Lane Kiffin, his aggression didn't start until he passed his own 50. I mean, do we have to do stuff like that? I still go back. I know nobody wants to hear this, but we don't get it. We miss a block. We don't get it on fourth down, but then we give up a touchdown for a 43-yard rush. If that ball was on the 20-yard line and that same play would have been run, we would have just given up a touchdown for an 80-yard rush, because we misfit on the edge. We don't make a tackle in the secondary. Where I'm at right now, we're still going through and talking through. Harrison and I are going to sit down and watch the full game. We'll watch both our copy and the TV copy. The TV copy kind of gives you more of a flow of the game versus it being cut up, to where you watch it from the coach's perspective. And then and go through and say, okay, if we punt right here, because the frustrating part of where we're at right now, we are, I think we're 103rd in the country in converted fourth downs. I think we're like 1 of 9, or we were 1 of 5 the other night. So maybe we're 2 of 9 or something like that. So we're not converting on fourth downs. We do have a really good punter. So in that case, punt the ball away, play defense. The frustrating thing is the very next play is a touchdown, So it's easy in the moment after it happens to say, man, you should have punted the ball. I mean, hell, I know that after it happens. After I don't get the first down, that's the first thing I say is, well, man, I should have punted the ball. It's easy to be that guy, First time I ever met Mac Brown, I heard him say, hey, for everybody that's got all these plays, tell me on Friday night, not tell me on Sunday. I already know what I screwed up on Sunday, and so, but we are. I've got to sit down and look at what we're doing. I will tell you, we're going to have to play better defense to do that, because if you're 128th in the country on defense, you're just cutting down the amount of time that they're going to score, because we're not stopping anybody right now.
Maybe one of his most interesting thoughts of the day, and a little bewildering to me, because I feel like he was almost employing the logic that he was discouraging us from using as fans when he talks about, well, it would have been an 80-yard touchdown, if not a 40, if we would have punted. Well, that's hindsight knowledge, obviously, but he's talking about everybody knows in hindsight what we should have done. So I feel like that was a little contradictory. I was kind of confused by that. And Chris, I just don't believe that the defense feels the same or can be called the same on their own end of the field versus on the opponent's 20 or whatever it may be. And maybe I'm wrong on that. I know you want to say, hey, D, buck up, short field, get out there and be tough. And yeah, they probably should, but I feel like that's asking them to go an extra mile that isn't quite necessary. I don't know. And I would say there's all kinds of different ways to skin this cat or spin this argument when you say, all right, defense is not playing good. So does that mean we're taking more chances as an offense because we're afraid to turn it back to the defense? Or does that mean we want to give the defense, a leg up as far as a longer field for the offense to have to travel? So I thought of all the things that we heard from Coach McGuire today, that was one of the more interesting thoughts that he kicked out. How did you process what he had to say there?
I think they're just trying to figure out what's the best way to go about this. And it's like the analytics thing is very difficult because, as we've talked about, you either are in or out. There's not a perfect answer. And football is a series of decisions that are being made. Whether it's what play I'm calling, what do I do here? Do I call a timeout? There's all kinds of management, and whether this player should be on, what package should we be in? And when you lose like they did, it's like you're just questioning everything. But I go back to him going back to his roots, because I think that freshman hit that sideline, and I guess if the same play would have been run, maybe you do call something different. But if it's the same play that's run, he's still running down the sideline. Maybe that's the way I vision that, because he ran right in front of me. I was like, it's like I did the one to do the Woody Hayes and like, stick my
I would have
foot,
loved to have seen that.
I
Here
would,
comes Big Handsome.
I wouldn't be talking to you anymore. They would have Tyreek Hill me, and I'd have been taken out in cuffs or whatever.
But not Locked On Texas Tech, baby. You'd have been welcome here, in cuffs or otherwise.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. I'll be real curious what we get this weekend and going forward on what they feel is best. And it doesn't mean that they'll have the perfect solution, but
no,
I think analytics in because there's a lot of times it's like, what are we doing sending the punter out? You coward. How dare you just, punt? You're so conservative. There's those coaches out there too.
Tommy Tuberville. Remember some of those moments? A lot of that, though, I think late game stages. Because he was kind of the context you were describing yesterday. Like, sometimes there's desperation, and he's still going conservative. And you're thinking, what? Are you yelling?
He was so I think he was worried about what the final score would ultimately look like. Like, how are we?
Yeah.
And so. Yeah, I just don't know what the right answer is. I don't know if they do either. But I did understand it's kind of a different way to look at it, and you could absolutely call it kind of contradictory. But he's coming at it from a defensive minded lens and saying, if we would have just tackled the dude and been whatever, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So that's really what I want this conversation to be about. That's just because coaches all come from. There's very few that have been brought up like on both sides of the ball. You're either one or the other, and you just get back to your roots. And it's like, I'm sure that the fourth down play eats him up, but he's gonna wear the defensive one because that's what he knows. That's what he is passionate about. That's why he ultimately came up in football and is the head coach at Texas Tech, because of his work on defense and the ability to recruit and all those things.
Well, I think you also want to draw a hard line as a coach and not be saying like, okay, you gave up the 40-yard touchdown run. It's okay, D, because we put you in a bad spot. Don't worry about it. You want to say, make the freaking play wherever you are on the field. So I think there's some of that as well, where a coach is just going to, at the end of the day, get to the brass tacks, which is they did not make the play. They didn't fit it. They didn't whatever to keep it from happening. But we'll be curious to hear from viewers and listeners on that one. I thought that was a really interesting answer. Something else that's really interesting is what they're going to be doing to try to address this issue of penalties. And that was another thing that Coach McGuire spoke on.
It's not just the 21 penalties. When you sit there and you think about the penalties, there's going to be times that you're going to get a holding penalty. There's going to be times that you're going to get – you don't want a hands to the face ever, because I think that's a lack of discipline from the standpoint of where you're putting your hands and where you're putting your eyes. But I think we've had 12 to 13 pre-snap penalties, and that is on us. So it goes back to number one, going through and talking through our procedure. Are we trying to speed up, and are we trying to draw people off sides? There's some stuff that's happening where there's not a play really called, but you're trying to line up quick. And so it's a lack of discipline there. We also asked Huff to make a call to our local chapter, and so we'll have officials at every practice. And they'll make calls just like they would in a game, and then we'll have them address the team at the end. I learned that from Dave Aranda. In 2021, if you go back after 2 games, Baylor was the most penalized team in the Big 12, and I think right now we're 126th in the country in penalties. I think we were probably at the same spot, and that's what we did. We made a dramatic improvement, and so we're going to do the same thing. I was glad to be a part of it because, so we'll start tomorrow. We'll have officials at our practice, and everything that's going on from individual to group to team, they'll be officiating, and then at the end we'll give them a chance to address what they're seeing.
I mean, just one of the most shocking aspects of the 2024 version of the Red Raiders so far. There's no way around this. We've talked about what the penalty numbers looked like last year. It took you 4 games to get where you are through only 2 weeks. And it's really not something I saw coming for whatever reason. So it's one of those things I'm most taken aback by so far.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it. You're 118th in the country. There's several programs that have been penalized more as far as number of penalties and yardage. But yeah, 21 for 158 is what you've been tacked on. But North Texas also 21 penalties for 172 yards.
Come on down, Mean
there
Green.
there you go. So the referees may be busy. Again, I go back
to bring a backup whistle.
That's right. I go back to going back to your roots. Would you hear him saying, "This is what we did at this point. It worked. We're going to do this again, and we're going to have officials in our practices looking at drills and live periods and tell us what you see." There's also the fact that you had a Pac-12 officiating crew, there on Saturday, I believe, and which the Pac-12 is 2 schools, and what was it, 6 or 7 penalties for you in the first half and 0 for Washington State. But this is what losers say. I mean, this is what you point, because I know we'll get to this later in the week, but there was one call where you had a player ejected that I just thought is just bad. I mean, we're
going to get to that for sure.
And there's several things that don't show up in the box score as far as maybe ones that weren't called or whatever. But it's the pre-snap. That's if you're being aggressive or playing really hard and you get a holding or you get a personal foul because you're just playing past the whistle, you can almost deal with that. But it's just the boneheaded mental mistakes, not being on the same page with the snap count or whatever it is. And there's been way too much of that that I think has gone on. And that's really what he's talking about. Jumping off sides or false starting or whatever it may be. Those are the ones that I think just drive a coach crazy, because it's literally nobody is doing anything to you. You are literally pulling the pistola out, pointing it at your foot. And it's just maddening. And the game's hard enough as it is.
Yeah.
So you go from 1st and 10 to 1st and 15, or you take a touchdown off the board because you're holding. Josh Kelly's touchdown came out. Just all these different things. So anyway.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that just brings me back to wondering if there's any wisdom in trying to simplify some of what you're doing. And it may just be based in some of the tempo, and he kind of touched on some of that as well. But are you more so hurting yourself as opposed to the opposition? Is it snap to snap, week to week? I don't know, but those things are so frustrating, and already hard enough to give yourself a chance to get a win without getting in the way. First 2 weeks, both the opponents lightly penalized, so maybe a much different experience against North Texas if they're coming to town. And why not just flip the script entirely? Let's be a lightly penalized team, possibly in week 3. I know you can't simplify it just to the extreme. Nobody rises to low standards, or low expectations. So it's not like you're, all right, guys, here's the ball on 3, ready, down, set, hut. Are we ready to go? You can't take it to that extreme, but you do also have to work with what the hand you're given. And if the hand you're given is struggling with some of these things as it results to whatever it may be, tempo or all the things they're being asked to do, I don't know. But it's been kind of wild to see. And a lot of that, I think we had some viewers comment on this when we asked about what would you really want to fix offensively if you had a selection. Both offensive line and penalties were 2 separate choices, and we've had some comment they seem kind of one and the same, because unfortunately a lot of these penalties have been rooted in the group up front. So that's obviously not a good thing. There's your breaking news to wrap up the show.
I think every one of the pre-snap ones is on the offensive line except for the one on Josh Kelly in the first game. I think that's right. I mean, I could be slightly off there, but I think so that's – hey, man, we'll all get through it together.
One of these things is going to be the right answer, right? There's a solution somewhere in what we've talked about.
Sure. And otherwise, I'm just going to keep throwing it and reeling it back in, and hopefully that I catch the answer.
That's right. We'll see what gets on the hook and whether or not we like it enough to keep. All right, Chris, appreciate your time as always. I do want to circle back to that Chapman-Lewis conversation with you, because I'm wondering, bad call or bad rule? And at this point in the progression of football, I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that, so I want to get your thoughts on it. You asked Coach McGuire about it, so we'll get his thoughts on that as well. And of course, we will revisit the topic of Micah Hudson that Coach McGuire also spoke on as well coming up this week. So stick with us. Get subscribed if you ain't already so you never miss a thing on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Enjoyed it, Chris. We'll see you for the next one.
Keep hope alive, people. Keep hope alive. Talk to you tomorrow.
Indeed. And keep mixing it up in the YouTube comment section. One of the best ways to help us grow the show is to comment anything below. So thanks to those who are doing that this week. And we appreciate you being out there. For Chris, I'm Casey, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.